since we are all here, let me start off, let me kick off this evening by firstly acknowledging the presence of Dr. Sergio Alcocer, President of COMEXI, Ambassador Pankaj Sharma and Ambassador Federico Salas Lotfe, our experts and colleagues from COMEXI, Ambassador Bhatia, distinguished guests and other participants. Buenas tardes for us here and buenos dias for you all in Mexico. So, buenas tardes, damas y caballeros. Es un gran placer para mí darles la bienvenida a este evento. Este evento es el primer vínculo entre MP-IDSA y COMEXI. Claro que hoy estamos participando en un evento virtual, pero esperamos que algún día en el futuro tengamos la oportunidad de reunirnos cara a cara. As a former ambassador of India to Mexico, I'm really delighted today to welcome you all to the first bilateral dialogue between our institute, the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses, and the Consejo Mexicano de Asuntos Internacionales, that's COMEXI, as it's popularly known. It's a virtual event, but as I said a moment ago in Spanish, we hope one day to meet in person as well. I particularly wish to thank Ambassador Pankaj Sharma and Ambassador Federico Salas Lotfe for joining us at the inaugural session and for agreeing to deliver special remarks as well. Let me begin by revealing an interesting fact, a factoid from the past. When I was appointed India's ambassador to Mexico in 2012, I had a chat with one of my predecessors. In fact, he's with us this evening, Ambassador Bhatia. And he told me something that I will never forget. He said that I was lucky to be posted to Mexico, which in fact is one of the best kept secrets in our ministry. It's a best kept secret in terms of how good it is. And for me, it truly turned out to be an enchanting posting. For 3 years and 3 months that I was there, I really found myself in a very, very fortunate position there. It was very fulfilling, both personally as well as professionally. They were some of the best years that I experienced in my nearly 4 decades long career. Friends, ties between India and Mexico date back many centuries, as we all know. Much has been written about the ancient links between the Mayans and southern India as well. We are reminded of the galleon trade between the Philippines and Nueva España, as Mexico was then known as. Trade and commerce flourished between Mexico and all the major countries of the Indo-Pacific in the past. In the contemporary age, India-Mexico relations have been characterized by mutual understanding and all-round cooperation. Our privileged partnership and high-level meetings have given impetus to our bilateral cooperation as well. The recent exchange of visits by the 2 foreign ministers and the 6th round of Foreign Office consultations have also consolidated our ties. New areas of cooperation have emerged, focusing on crop monitoring, drought assessment, and capacity building between ISRO and the Mexican Space Agency. I feel that India and Mexico, as emerging economies, as what is popularly known as middle powers, we are destined to play an important role in a rapidly changing world. The tyranny of distance between India and Mexico no longer poses an impediment to our interaction, as our virtual conference demonstrates today. We will today, in the course of our event, exchange views about our bilateral relations and developments at the regional and global levels. From India's point of view, an already fragile international compact has been further weakened by the economic and military rise of China, for instance, in the Asian space, and the war in Ukraine has only compounded matters. The COVID-19 pandemic has proved an accelerant of sorts. It has created new challenges, ranging from healthcare to energy to critical supply chains. Everything has been affected by the pandemic. Terrorism continues to rear its ugly head. The return of the Taliban in Afghanistan and the growing influence of the Islamic State Khorasan have given a fresh lease of life to radical ideologies and terrorist safe havens. One hopes that the international community can work together in the context of the Counter-Terrorism Committee chaired by India at the UN Security Council, as well as in the context of the 1267 Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee. One hopes that permanent members with veto powers will not deliberately block the effort of the international community to list global terrorists, as we have seen from some recent examples very recently. Developing countries today are easily drawn, I might point out, towards predatory financing without realizing the risks of debt trap diplomacy. This is very much in evidence in the Indo-Pacific in particular, but even Europe has not been inured to this kind of influence. There is a pushback. India stands today for a free and open Indo-Pacific in which countries will have better choices available to them. India is working closely with its partners in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue framework to create secure supply chains, protect access to critical technologies, and improve maritime domain awareness. We are working with like-minded partners to give fresh options to others for both infrastructure and connectivity. As non-permanent members of the UN Security Council and as G20 members, there is scope for us, India and Mexico, to seek new convergences on many areas, on climate change, sustainable development, renewable energy, terrorism, and non-traditional threats as well. As we look ahead, India must focus on deepening trade ties with Mexico in the CELAC and the Pacific Alliance. Both India and Mexico have an interest in Africa. We should explore the possibilities of joint projects in select African countries. We could also establish regular dialogues on border management, including drugs, arms and illegal crossings, etc. Both countries have unique experience in this regard. A new area of interest from our point of view, from our institute's point of view, is the defense sector in India, which is open to 100% foreign direct investment. Mexico has well-known strengths in aerospace and certain types of defense manufacturing, which is of interest to India. Naval cooperation could also be bolstered. Exchanges between defense training institutions, such as the National Defense College in New Delhi and the Defense Services Staff College in Tamil Nadu, and their counterparts in Mexico, could be explored and should be encouraged. So in conclusion, I would like to state that we should interact much more frequently in order to generate new ideas, in order to take our ties forward into the future. With these few words, may I now request Dr. Sergio Alcocer, my esteemed counterpart and president of COMEXI, to kindly deliver his welcome remarks. And thank you all for listening to me with great patience. Over to you, Dr. Alcocer.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chinoy, and it is my distinct pleasure for me to be here with you. And I would like to greet our ambassadors, Ambassador Salas and Ambassador Sharma from Mexico in India and from India in Mexico. And it's very glad to see all of you this evening in India, this morning here in Mexico City. As Ambassador Chinoy was mentioning, the relation between India and Mexico has been very fruitful in many years in the past. I was reading some quote by President Nehru at the time when he said that our nations were like a palimpsest, in the sense that we are erased and then we are right over every time. These are very old nations that have very common similarities, and certainly many areas of opportunity. As Ambassador Chinoy was mentioning, the relation between India and Mexico now is involved between rivalry between great powers like the United States and China, the Russian aggression towards Ukraine, and many other hurdles that are taking place in our world. And the role of think tanks, I do believe, has to do with how can we think about peace, maintaining peace, building peace, and also building prosperity among our nations. In this case, particularly between Mexico and India. In the case of Mexico, as we all know, we are part of North America. We have a free trade agreement signed with the United States and Canada, and Mexico is working very hard in order to improve the resilience of supply chains that are part of these huge conglomerate. We are working in order to, along the ideas of friend shoring, ally shoring, in order to improve the competitiveness of the North American region. And one of the ways that we have seen that the competitiveness can be improved is by allowing exchanges in science and technology, education, and working together in emerging technologies. I think this is some of the areas in which we can work together between Mexico and India. Of course, India is very highly regarded because of its quality of scientists and engineers. We also know the advances that have been brought in India related to emerging technologies, being those that are involved with biotechnology, new materials, cognitive sciences, and so on. And these, I think, areas in which we can cooperate much stronger. And whatever we can do from the think tank point of view, from the Manohar Parrikar think tank in Mexico, of course, I think that this is an area of large opportunity for both of our countries. Ambassador Chinoy mentioned the issue of border management and water. These are also issues that are quite relevant here in Mexico. Right now, we are suffering one of the most severe droughts that we have observed in the past years in the northern part of Mexico. And this has to do also with the relation with the United States because we manage three rivers that are part of the border between Mexico and the US. And whatever happens in that region in terms of drought or not drought really complicates or facilitates the relation between our two countries. So what we have learned over almost a century, maintaining these treaties that not only define the border of Mexico, but also define the way we manage these three rivers, I think will be of large interest to India, I suppose. And I'm very interested of what Ambassador Chinoy mentioned about exchanging or having exchanges and cooperation on the defense area. This is something that in Mexico has not been very popular in the past, but I think this is quite interesting to see what we can do, what we can learn both countries. But for this event, I was reading a little bit of what Octavio Paz, our ambassador to India in the 1950s, wrote about India and Mexico. And I would just want to read a paragraph that he wrote, and please allow me to read it in Spanish, although I will try to translate it into English. And he said at one time, advertí que entre los indios era muy viva la conciencia de sus diferencias con otros pueblos. Es una actitud que comparten los mexicanos. De ahí que no sea exagerado decir que el hecho de ser mexicano me ayudó a ver las diferencias mis diferencias de mexicano. No son las mismas, por supuesto, pero son un punto de vista. Quiero decir, puedo comprender hasta cierto punto qué significa ser indio porque soy mexicano. In short, he said that by being Mexican, it helped him to understand and to understand what Indians are, and perhaps the other way around. So we are different, yes, but at the same time, we have a lot of commonalities that allow us to understand ourselves and to have a very good relation. So with this, I would like to thank the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis for having taken the idea and brought it in our discussions to have this seminar and to discuss the relation between our countries, the relation between Latin America and India. And of course, from COMEXI, we would like to maintain this dialogue in the next months and years to come in order to produce not only these type of webinars, but also to produce, I think, that papers and recommendations, policy recommendations for our two governments. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you very much, Ambassador Chinoy, for setting up this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sergio Alcocer, for your very thoughtful remarks, and also for proposing that we maintain regular contacts and that we do great work together to give options to our governments also to promote our bilateral ties. So I'm with you on that particular task and objective. At this stage, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our two ambassadors to deliver their special remarks. I begin with Ambassador Pankaj Sharma, the Ambassador of India to Mexico, who has, alongside Ambassador Federico Salas Lotfe, supported our dialogue and encouraged us, both sides, to connect and to engage more. So over to you, Ambassador Pankaj Sharma. Please kindly deliver your special reports. It's a great privilege to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Chinoy, President Sergio Alcocer, Ambassador Salas, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, Ambassador Nathan Wolf, Major General Dr. Bipin Bakshi, Mr. Vladimir Hernandez, distinguished scholars and experts. In fact, Octavio Paz belongs as much to India as to Mexico, and I had also started with his quote, which has already been said by President Alcocer. In fact, when he said that he can understand what it means to be Indian because he was Mexican, we thought that his profound quote applies equally to us Indians, as we can understand what it means to be Mexicans because we are Indians. It is this deep mutual understanding that lies at the heart of India-Mexico relationship. I must say that dialogues like this help furthering our understanding and provide an opportunity both for analysis and introspection, as well as reviewing the status of the relationship so as to chart the future direction. I compliment Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies under the able leadership of Ambassador Chinoy and COMEXI under the leadership of President Sergio Alcocer for organizing this dialogue, which seeks to contribute to strengthening our bilateral relations. Friends, allow me to express my gratitude to my predecessors. I stand on the shoulders of giants like Ambassador Sujan Chinoy and Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, among several others who have handed over to me a strong foundation built over the last 72 years, including this India House where I sit today. Today, both sides realize that we both are on similar paths of development and share a common vision based on common principles. There is a mutual resolve to elevate the privileged partnership that we share into a strategic partnership, the roadmap of which was laid during the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Mexico in 2016. Today, as was said by Ambassador Chinoy, Mexico occupies a prominent and leading position in Latin America. Mexico has a unique position as a portal to both North and South America, with its ease of doing business policies and large domestic market and labor force. It has taken up various initiatives with goals of regional development and cooperation, being member of regional bodies such as CELAC and Pacific Alliance. India too occupies a key position in Asia and has also contributed to regional development with its neighborhood first policy and membership of regional bodies like SAARC and BIMSTEC. Both India and Mexico have strong and robust economies, which have sustained the shocks of catastrophic global events. Even as the specific contours of this strategic relationship are yet to be formalized, it bears weight to consider the developments in the economic, political, technological, and cultural cooperation between the two countries. Business and investment are important drivers of this relationship. In 2021, India breached the list of Mexico's top 10 trading partners, signaling its arrival as a weighty economic partner. The bilateral trade has crossed an all-time high of US dollars 10.1 billion. IT, automobiles, pharmaceuticals are key growth areas of our trade and investment basket. We're trying to expand the areas of cooperation to space and science and technology. Bilateral investment is on the rise. The presence of Indian companies in Mexico and Mexican companies in India is increasing. The academic exchanges are growing with signing of new MOUs between reputed Indian and Mexican universities. Ayurveda as a subject of common interest has allowed India to establish academic collaboration in Ayurveda with leading Mexican universities. We received amazing response from our Mexican friends this year when we celebrated International Day of Yoga in 8 different cities of Mexico in 8 days. The relationship has benefited from the recent spurt in high-level exchanges from both sides, starting with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar's visit to Mexico in September 2021, and the return visit of Honorable Foreign Minister of Mexico, His Excellency Mr. Marcelo Ebrard, to India in March 2022. We successfully concluded the 6th Foreign Office consultations in July this year. As I speak, we are preparing for the visit by an Indian parliamentary delegation led by Honorable Speaker of Lok Sabha, Shri Om Birla, to Mexico at the end of this month. The bilateral high-level group on trade and investment cooperation is scheduled to be held in November 2022. Friends, as we emerge from the shadows of COVID-19 pandemic, the world bet itself on democracies like India and Mexico as major economies in the regions. However, the trade between India and Latin America faces procedural delays, which significantly increase the cost of doing business. Hence, we need to address these issues to realize the true potential of trade between India and Latin American countries, such as Mexico. We are working on an FTA, a bilateral investment treaty, and several other agreements to strengthen the institutional framework between India and Mexico. India and Mexico have always upheld multilateralism as a way forward for global development. Both countries have portrayed strategic autonomy in their foreign policies, and they must work together when the threats to world order are on the rise. We need to have a regular political dialogue, which will help us in working together as part of global organizations like the United Nations and G20. The world is more interconnected, and threats of drugs, weapons, trafficking, and terrorism transgress national boundaries, as was highlighted by Ambassador Chinoy. We both feel that a growing convergence on international issues also allows us to join our capacities to strengthen international regimes of strategic importance. Another important area of interest is defense cooperation, as also underlined by Ambassador Chinoy. India, under its vision of Atmanirbharta, has increased its defense manufacturing capabilities with liberal foreign direct investment rules in defense manufacturing sector, something which Mexico can take advantage of. Though a team from National Defense College of India visited Mexico in 2021, we need more defense exchange programs between our defense forces. The space cooperation is progressing well, and I'm sure there's much more that Mexico can benefit from experiences of ISRO in developing low-cost and effective space technologies. On the other hand, India looks forward to cooperating with the Mexican Space Agency, as well as establishing a cooperative framework with the Latin American Space Agency, ALCE, with the help of Mexico. Health sector was recognized as an important area of cooperation during the recent visit of Foreign Minister Ebrard to India. A recent success in this regard was the signing of a strategic partnership and technology transfer agreement between BIRMEX and CIPLA on 10th August. More such collaborations in the area of joint vaccine and pharmaceutical production, as well as direct procurement of generic medicines by the Mexican government from India will greatly benefit us all. The potential for cooperation is unlimited, but time allocated to me is limited. So in the benefit of other speakers, I will conclude my remarks here. I once again thank the Manohar Parrikar IDSA and COMEXI for inviting me to the dialogue and wish success for today's session. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pankaj Sharma. Your remarks have actually brought back a flood of memories for me, and no doubt for Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia as well. Both of us, like you, have tried our best to put India-Mexico relations onto a much higher pedestal. And I'm sure with the passage of time, with each new addition, brick by brick, we will develop that structure that we all want to see, an enduring structure in the 21st century. May I now request Ambassador Federico Salas Lotfe, the Ambassador of Mexico to India, to kindly deliver his special remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chinoy. I'm very, very happy to be participating in this webinar today. I want to thank you for and the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis for the initiative that has been taken to bring this to fruition. And of course, also want to recognize the great efforts of Dr. Alcocer and COMEXI in making this a possibility. I want to say that in both cases, both Ambassador Chinoy and Dr. Alcocer have been very enthusiastic in making sure that this event happened and that we take it forward. And I'm very happy that it's finally taking place. I also want to thank the presence of Ambassador Batia. I must say that I am very fortunate that I am both a good friend of Ambassador Chinoy and Ambassador Batia. I have benefited from both their advice and their knowledge of Mexico. And I think that when we think about this quote of Octavio Paz that has been brought to the fore here, I think that as Indians, they understand Mexico in a way that only someone that has lived in my country can possibly do that. And in that sense, they bring forth the possibility of advancing enhancing the relationship that exists between Mexico and India. I want to I want to recall just a meeting that I had with Ambassador Chinoy I think a couple of months ago, or when we talked about the possibility of this taking place. And I remember that I said to him that, sort of about the formalities of bringing this forward. And he's basically just said to me, look, let's just do it. Let's go ahead and do it. And I thank you very much for that drive and that enthusiasm that has made this possible today. And of course, I want to thank the presence of Ambassador Sharma here, with whom also I have a very good working relationship, and all the other panelists, Ambassador Nathan Wolf, a colleague of mine, and all the others that are here, that I'm very happy to see all of you participating in this event. As it has been said and by previous speakers, the relationship between Mexico and India is one that is growing, and in every possible indicator, we can find signs of a relationship that is doing very well, that is going in the right direction, and that new avenues of cooperation are opening all the time. And that, I think, is very important because it is enriching and expanding the relationship in many ways. One of the results of all this is that we have become very important for each other. Mexico for India and India for Mexico. And I think just to mention one indicator, India is now one of the top 10 trading partners of Mexico in the world, and Mexico is also one of the top trading partners of India in the Latin American region. So this really speaks of this growing importance that many people are not aware of, precisely because they always see that these are two countries that are very far away, and there's not much visibility of the kind of exchanges that are taking place. But as I was saying, there's new and very interesting and exciting avenues of cooperation that have been opening up in the recent past. And let me just mention a few. I think I may be repeating some of what maybe have been said here before. The cooperation in pharmaceutical technology, as Ambassador Sharma said, we just signed an MOU between Birmex and CIPLA here, but there's also other areas of technology, of digital aspects, IT, artificial intelligence that we're working on to benefit both each other from this type of innovative knowledge. There's also, as has been mentioned here, the cooperation in space technology. That is something that is expanding. We just signed and expanded the MOU that exists already between the two space agencies in order to work in new areas of agriculture, which are very important for both our countries. And as was mentioned by Ambassador Sharma, the new cooperation that we're developing in traditional medicine in Ayurveda, which I think is very important. And I know that this is something that is very high in the priority lists of the Indian government, starting from the Prime Minister. And finally, one issue which I think is also very important is not something necessarily new, but that it's obviously always has new developments, which is the cooperation that we have on the multilateral forums and the international agenda in general. This past 2 years, we have been partners in the working together in the Security Council of the United Nations, and very soon, at the end of this year, India, once it takes over the leadership of the G20, we're going to be working also very closely with excuse me, with India, to make sure that the priorities that we have talked about, that we're exchanging, that are of interest to both countries, are realized, and that we can make a contribution, an important contribution to the world agenda, and to make a world that is more attuned to the interests of the peoples of India and Mexico. Sorry. So in this context, I think it is very important that the channels of communication and contact that exist between both countries multiply. And I think that because I think it's fundamental that both our understanding and knowledge of each other continues to grow and continues to expand. And I think that this webinar is a very good example of that. It's a good first step. I hope it's only the first one in a of many that we can have, where we can have exchange of different ideas, different topics, some things that have been mentioned that we really have not been talking about too much between Mexico and India, such as defense cooperation, can be the subject, for example, of a specific dialogue that we have in the context of a webinar like this one, or even better, in an in-person meeting that could be arranged in the not so distant future. And hopefully that we can come up with, and I think somebody mentioned, some policy recommendations that we can make to both our governments to improve and to, as I said before, expand the already very good relationship that exists between both our countries. So with that, I'm very eager to hear what the other experts that are here at this present in this panel have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador and good friend, for your kind remarks. And your remarks only serve to highlight the fact that our strategic partnership should rest on multiple legs, and the trade and economic partnership would be among the most important. We cannot afford to ignore that aspect. It provides the true ballast for our relationship as well. So let us work together. And I want to offer an annual dialogue between the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses and COMEXI. Let's make this a very regular annual dialogue. And perhaps in the future, we can even expand the scope to bring in other stakeholders. I'll discuss this with you as well as with Ambassador Sharma. With these few words, let me conclude the inaugural session, in which we have been privileged to have the presence of both the ambassadors, and I really wish to thank them profusely for taking time out to support our track to dialogue. Your presence, in fact, infuses our dialogue with much greater significance. So with these words, thank you all very much from my side. I now wish to invite Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia to chair session 1, which will discuss regional developments and bilateral relations. And I'm sure you will have many good speakers. We have several from our side and the Mexican side lined up already. Over to you, Ambassador Bhatia. Your timelines, of course, are known to you. They are part of the program. So over to you, Ambassador Bhatia.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy. It's a great pleasure and privilege for me to be here, and I would like, right in the beginning, to convey my very warm greetings to President Alcocer, the president of COMEXI. Having been in Mexico, I know how important and influential this institution is. And in IDSA, you have a very apt and appropriate counterpart. So let me congratulate both the heads of these institutions for this wonderful initiative. And in fact, I particularly want to compliment Ambassador Chinoy, who has already offered the idea of an annual dialogue. I particularly also want to convey my warm greetings to the two ambassadors, Ambassador Salas and Ambassador Pankaj Sharma, both good friends. And I think one can be confident that in their hands, the relationship is very safe and progressing very well. In the next 4.5 minutes, please allow me not to speak as a diplomat, but as a modest scholar. That means, please forgive me if I'm a little bit candid and frank so that we can trigger some dialogue, and that would also avoid me from restating the basic trends which have already been so ably and well presented. Essentially, what I would like to begin by saying is that Mexico offers to a tourist, a diplomat, a foreign visitor, or even a short-time observer, a remarkable package of history, art, culture, music, food, tourism, and serious intellectual possibility of serious intellectual exchange. This is what I felt when I was there for an abbreviated term. But even those 16 months have left an indelible imprint on my mind. And it is from that perspective, let me say that I think in India, we need to expand the awareness and knowledge about Mexico's role, about, for example, Mexico's foreign policy. I don't know as of now how much interest in Mexico there is about India's foreign policy, but the reverse here does not really create great confidence. So I think we need to put our heads together to see how this can be done. I've been doing some research and I found that the foreign minister continuously makes the point that this is a really good moment for the Mexican foreign policy because Mexico is enjoying a great deal of prestige and moral support from the world. And yet, on the other hand, the critics, and there are quite a few, who keep pointing out the difficulties there. And they keep referring to the management of the COVID pandemic, the difficulties on policy with regard to the war in Ukraine, and essentially in terms of giving perhaps a little bit more emphasis on the domestic policy than the foreign policy. Therefore, the important thing is, in terms of the first part of the theme of this session, regional developments, I think the study of the two foreign policies is a must, because for Mexico, the region is virtually, in many ways, the whole world. If you look at Mexico's foreign policy, clearly relationship with the North America and Central and South America, they all are very important. And on top of that, Mexico takes a lot of interest in Asia and in the Indo-Pacific region, although primarily through the economic channel. On the other hand, for India, the world is a family, truly speaking, because the induction of the Indo-Pacific as a strategic geopolitical concept has expanded India's interest, and therefore, I think Mexican scholars may particularly like to convey to us and explain to us as to how they are now looking themselves as an Indo-Pacific power and how their membership of CPTPP and the Pacific Alliance and their relationship, the growing relationship with China, ASEAN, India, how that can really be made to converge with the new trends in India's foreign policy. For our panelists, I would like to throw yet another challenge, which is on the bilateral side. I think for the last 15 years or so, when the privileged relationship was established, and especially since Ambassador Salas came to India, there is a continuing emphasis on how to elevate the privileged relationship to strategic partnership. I'm sure the two governments by now have already worked out the parameters and the goalposts which need to be secured so that we could really reach that level soon. And there, I think, in a very frank manner, I must put it across to you that the involvement and the engagement of the highest level political leadership is absolutely essential. We just cannot have a strategic relationship with a country where the highest level of leaders meet infrequently. We know that there is a problem, but that needs to be addressed. And I'm therefore very happy to know, as Pankaj Sharma said just now, that the Speaker of the Indian Parliament will be visiting Mexico. This is a good step in that direction. My final point essentially is also to say that in terms of the bilateral relationship, we have already spoken about the economic aspects, science and technology aspect, space, and I'm very happy that slowly defense cooperation and security cooperation are now being put squarely on the table. I think it would help if the think tank relationship and the relationship among universities could also be expanded speedily, because quite clearly now India is a country where all these institutions are lining up for dialogues, for interaction, for exchanges. This is a good step, COMEXI IDSA dialogue, but perhaps we need to go even beyond this as mutual interest is established. So with these initial words as the chair, I would now very much like to start our session, and the session is very clear and straight away. We have two speakers on regional developments, and at this stage, it's my great pleasure to invite Dr. Ashok Bevaria, Senior Fellow and Coordinator, South Asia Center at MP-IDSA, and I request you to please take the floor now. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes.
The distinguished participants, without much ado, let me now get into the theme that I have been assigned to speak on. In fact, we have all been told now by Ambassador Pankaj Sharma about the way India looks at the neighborhood. And I think, when India and Mexico are now sharing a very good friendly space, and relationship is also diversifying in a way, in a great manner. I would say that we need to be aware of the developments happening in our respective neighborhoods and the perspectives that we have towards them. In fact, if we look at South Asia, all of you know the kind of preeminence that India has. It accounts for about 70% of the geographical space, 70 plus percent of the GDP, and also about 70 plus percent of about defense expenditure. In that sense, India is actually very, very preeminent in the sense its influence perhaps has not been, I would say, capitalized in a manner which could have enhanced regional integration. That is primarily because of the mindless resistance put by our Western neighbor, which is not allowing the regional integration to develop in a particular way. That is precisely because of its mindlessness that regional integration efforts have not been very, very successful. But coming to the developments in the region, especially since the pandemic has struck this region, I would say that India stands out as an island of stability and growth. It has not been affected by the pandemic as much as other sister countries in the neighborhood have been. In fact, the inflation rate in most of these countries are galloping ahead. We have seen what has happened to Sri Lanka. In fact, there was an economic meltdown, which has resulted in political instability as well. India has always believed in non-reciprocal help being extended to its neighbors. We have a huge line of credit as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. We have similar lines of credit vis-a-vis Nepal, Bangladesh, Maldives, and other countries as well. In fact, India was one of the few countries which had invested about $2 billion in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2021. Those two decades. In that sense, India has always believed in a prosperous neighborhood so that it can grow in a balanced manner. Only because of Pakistan's resistance that we have not been able to access countries in the Western neighborhood, Western and Central Asian neighborhoods. But as far as political developments are concerned, we have seen during this pandemic period, we have seen the change in government in Kabul, a very, I would say, regressive regime has come back to power again with promise of moderation, but it has not come about as yet. In fact, if we look at the international media, they are carrying probing reports about the way the regime has been averse to upholding the rights of the minorities and the rights of women. And the kind of regressive radicalism that is being seen in the PACA space is also having its impact in other neighborhoods as well, in the sense that it is resulting in reactive radicalism in many spaces, and is also playing havoc with the political sentiments of people in the region, which has to be noted by the international community, because the way the withdrawal of the United States forces happened in Afghanistan has actually emboldened the regressive forces in the entire region. In fact, the next country that is actually facing the brunt of it is Pakistan itself. Pakistan has always used radicalism, radical forces as a constituency to create subversion, or to subvert the politics and economy of countries in the neighborhood, and especially in India and Afghanistan. But at the moment, it has been the victim of its own game, in the sense that it is facing the brunt of Tehrik-e-Taliban politics, Taliban attacks ever since Taliban has come to power. So this is the Western, I would say Southwestern, in the Southwestern neighborhood, Southwestern Asia, especially in the northwestern part of it, we find this radicalism coming to the fore. It has had impact on other areas in Bangladesh, even in Maldives. In Sri Lanka, we had an Easter attack, attack on churches. So it is pretty much, now dispersed in the entire region, which is a cause for concern. And this is an area where, Mexico and India can also work together, especially in the counter-terrorism efforts. So far as the political stability in other countries are concerned, I would say that the economic decline or economic, I would say, meltdown due to pandemic has had its impact in other countries as well, in the sense that in Nepal there was a regime change, in Sri Lanka we have seen a regime change, and we are finding the effects of this pandemic also quite unsettling as far as the political space is concerned in various countries. Another important incident that I have to point out here, underline here, is the way the Galwan siege also took place during the pandemic. In fact, the Chinese effort to unilaterally change the LAC also led to some kind of a confrontation there. There is this Sino-Pac strategic nexus, which is also creating a different kind of challenge for India and the rest of the countries in the region as well. As far as Sri Lanka is concerned, the economic fallout would not have been as severe had Sri Lanka not entered into a debt trap. A lot of discussion in these South Asian countries are now being devoted to the way China has tried to extend loans with higher interest rates, creating a debt trap in which these countries are finding themselves. So that is something where like-minded countries, especially democracies, can come together and try to find out a way of catering to the developmental aspirations of different countries in the people in different countries in the region. In fact, India, US, Japan, and Mexico, countries like all the democratic countries can come in and try to find out a way of making development less cumbersome, less burdensome, and less debt-ridden. In fact, at the moment, Pakistan is also facing a terrible economic crisis, and which has also had an impact on Pakistani politics as well. In fact, Imran Khan's regime had to be shown the door, and the new regime has come in, which is also finding it difficult to deal with the economic fallout. And in the sense that South Asia as a whole can prosper if, I would say that if all the countries can come together and settle the differences amongst them and create an opportunity for greater, larger economic integration. India has not been found wanting in its efforts, but it has so far not found it easy to pursue it with our Western neighbor, which could have brought a lot of prosperity and growth to the region. I will stop here. In fact, this conversation, I would say, has to be annualized so that we keep on exchanging our views on issues of common interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashok, for presenting in a very short time a very deep and perceptive analysis of the recent trends in South Asia. I think this should be of great benefit to our Mexican interlocutors, because you have brought out clearly the disastrous impact of COVID on the economies in this region. And at the same time, you have spelled out the trajectory of emergence of radicalism and fundamentalism, which have obviously endangered peace and security in the region. Clearly, your view is that South Asia needs much deeper and greater economic integration, but this simply cannot be achieved as long as I can be quite frank, Pakistan does not show sufficient interest in this. And at the same time, India's neighborhood first policy prevails, and India has gone out of its way to make sure that the neighboring countries receive all the help that they can, as undoubtedly Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh would testify. Thank you very much. May I now invite Ms. Guadalupe Gonzalez Chavez to please speak on recent developments in Latin America. And she is consultant columnist El Heraldo de Mexico and also professor and associate at COMEXI. Madam, we are looking forward to your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning from Mexico. First of all, I want to thank the invitation of your institution and COMEXI to be able to share some of our views on the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. Of course, we are celebrating with India your anniversary as a country, and I want to say how thankful is the Mexican society on the support that India gave at the beginning of the pandemic, giving us access to the vaccines. that is something that comes to our hearts, and we are very grateful. And we hope we will be able to continue with this line of solidarity between your country and your region and our country and your region. Yes, I should start saying that Indian presence is growing in Mexico and in Latin America. There are cities in where now you can find more thousands of Indian people, new youth and tech people coming in, and that we should add to the traditional cultural, economic, and touristic relationship with India. In talking of Latin America and the Caribbean, I would like to say that an important point is where you start to view the region, how you focus it. And I think there are probably in general, two approaches. One is more a descriptive way, which is not the one that I am going to take, but more an analytical manner of approaching to our region, or to describe what is happening and which are the main trends in Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, we are a very large region of 667 million population, which has borders with the ocean in three ways, at least in three ways. Well, yes, we look at the Pacific, we look at the Atlantic, but also we have a look to the Antarctica as a region. And both Central America and the Antarctica play a very important key role in global communications and interconnections. I want to start with this, saying that this multi-oceanic participation of Latin America and the Caribbean has a lot of influence on the way you look at the region. If you look it from the Pacific and Asia, you will look to us as the East. And if you are in Africa or in the Mediterranean or in Europe, they look to us as the West. And that's where one of the key points starts in the geopolitical and the location of the region in the world. Of course, there is a global dimension of the participation of Latin America and the Caribbean, but also there is another level of analysis that we should take in account, because it has to do with integration and the possibilities of cooperation, dialogue, and solidarity, which is the international way. We have global problems that have a very strong presence, like disasters, the climate change, now the pandemic. But we in Latin America and the Caribbean are starting to discuss what's the question of the governance of the different regions in the world. And I would raise the importance in this way, not only of the TPP and the Pacific Alliance, but the question of the governance of the whole Pacific region, which is something that matters too much to Latin America and the Caribbean. I should say that we are a region with a lot of disparities. We have countries that are in both extremes of the quality of life indicators, and we have problems, internal problems of social violence, and that 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 added to the pandemic and the economic deacceleration, and of course the hunger challenges are priorities for us, but also in the Atlantic. So when you ask us, and answering to the coordination of the panel, what's the role of China, or how is the impact of the current crisis of Ukraine or Africa or other regions? Well, we should say that Latin America and the Caribbean always receives consequences and impacts of all crises around the world. North, south, east, west, we are a receptive area of migration, global migration. Sometimes the migration patterns are analyzed from north to south, Central America to the United States, probably the crisis. But in reality, the Latin American and Caribbean region has always been a global receptor of migration and benefited from it. Since before the arrival of the Europeans, to the continent, there had been a lot of communication inside the region. And some analysts in Latin America, the international relations analysts, always remark that we should see to the construction of international relations in the region from the very beginning, since the first original people decided to live in the territories. And globalization pattern had happened in many stages of history. Now there is a discussion on global history, and of course, Latin America and the Caribbean were connected with the Pacific and the Atlantic and all the regions of the world from the 16th century to up until now. But where I would like to focus now is the question in the question of governance, in the question of regional governance. Being Latin America and the Caribbean a multifaceted, biodiverse, multi-political regimes region, the question of political dialogue and integration is key. We've been going through a discussion from whether or not just to try to deal with the development goals. Since the 60s, we joined the United Nations, all the efforts, we always work together in the Latin American group of countries. We have seen how even though there are political differences inside the region, we can get together in the UN Security Council and the main UN bodies. We usually work as a region from the point of view of the global and international peace and security system and development. But now we know that public administration is not enough to get to development. And the question is how to get the participation of all sectors, not only the government, not only the traditional economic services, commerce, administration, administrations in dealing with the direction of the region. We are clear now that because of the social situation, if you don't take in account the different and sometimes very polarized positions of political and social organizations, it's impossible to get governance. And that's where the region is going through now. We've seen how in the 60s there were some attempts to change the social situation. Mexico, for example, social justice is in the constitution since 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, but that not necessarily happened in Latin America and the Caribbean. So we had in the 60s coup d'etats and two revolutions, the Cuba and Nicaragua revolution, that should be considered a stage of a history in the history of what is called the progressives in Latin America, or the change, I would say the social change. However, in the 80s, we went through a great crisis, of course, influenced with the economic and global crisis in global recessions and patterns. And change had happened in the South Cone. Political reforms came, and there were a process of negotiations, peace negotiations that helped in stabilize the region. The 90s were a period of peaceful negotiations, electoral processes, integration in political life. The 2000s were also a period of political change in Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador. But an important event happened in every country. Constitutions were reformed. The legal and political basis, the traditional constitutions have been changing in the last 30 years. And we're seeing how now in Chile, in a few weeks, there will be a plebiscite voting on a new constitution, which we call new constitutionalism. And some have been going gradually, some have been going through a whole change in the constitution. But right now, what we're saying is that that is not enough. The pandemic and the social need for an openness, digital society opening had helped in moving the region towards more change. We've seen that in Mexico, Honduras, Chile, and Colombia recently. And an important thing is political opening and how to organize governance, local and regionally. There are new challenges in regional and sub-regional governance. The Central American region and the Caribbean have the two opposite indicators, the best growth indicators and the more difficult growth indicators, like the case of Panama, which is the one that is growing more, and less, and the permanent and historical crisis we have in the region, which is Haiti. There are many expectations right now that with the change in Colombia, and dialogue between actors inside Venezuela with the support of Nicaragua and I'm sorry, with the support of Mexico and Noruega, will help providing a floor for political arrangements. However, there are tensions inside Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala in terms of justice and human rights. Justice is a very important, and the rule of law is a question that has been discussed in the last 20 years, and it's a big question for Latin America. We know how it is important for peace and stability. On the other hand, pluralism and the presence of a new tendency to recognize diversity, social diversity, ethnic diversity, pluriculturalism, multiculturalism, and a need to have a new society and integration arrangement in the region is key. Of course, Latin America and the Caribbean are very proud for having the Tlatelolco Treaty, the non-proliferation and non-presence of nuclear weapons in the region. That is a basis for integration and cooperation. There are the region usually works with political confident measures after every political and military difficulties. We really hope that the peace and stability are part of the integration processes in the future, because that's the basis for the foreign relations of all the countries in the region. Of course, the Pacific Alliance is key for Mexico, for Costa Rica, for Peru, for Chile, for all the countries that founded it. But we hope that this alliance will provide a territory for fruitful relations, both in the social, economic, academic, and other areas. Right now there is, and I will finish with this, saying that the political discussion at the interior of the region is going on whether or not to strengthen the CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. And there is a discussion of reviewing and integrating more in the area of institutionalization and cooperation infrastructure inside the region, so that all the more than 10 integration processes that have been built in the last 2 centuries since our independences help us in creating a new model of integration.
Madam, forgive me for interruption, but maybe you can take another minute to conclude. We appreciate it.
Yes, actually, I was already finishing saying that the goal right now is how to solve the integration and disparities, solve problems dealing with climate change, cooperation both inside and with the rest of the regions of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Professor, for a brilliant analysis of a most complex situation of a large part of the world, about which I'm afraid audiences in India do not know enough. I think this allocation of 8 minutes to you is an injustice, and I hope that IDSA and other institutions would find a way to actually enable you to deliver a longer lecture on this vast region of 700 million people facing a host of social, economic, and political challenges. I think there is such a striking similarity between what you and your neighbors go through and to what happens in our neighborhood, that this would be a wonderful way to get to know each other and then start thinking of crafting similar solutions. Thank you so much. And now we would move to the other package or part of the package of this session, dear friends. We will go to attack or address the bilateral relations, and here on India-Mexico bilateral relations perspective from India, Ms. Ruchita Berry, whom all of you know, who is the organizer of this important conference. She is the Senior Research Associate and Coordinator, Africa, LAC, and UN Center at MP-IDSA. Ruchita, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bhatia. I'm really glad to be here and to be part of this first virtual dialogue between MP-IDSA and COMEXI. My topic of my discussion today is India-Mexico bilateral relations perspective from India. I must say that since the beginning of today's discussion, we've heard so much about India-Mexico relations by the eminent speakers. I find it very difficult to add very much more, but please bear with me and listen to what I have to say. The good news is that I will focus only on 4 areas of cooperation. So over the years, India and Mexico have developed a warm and cordial relationship. And despite the vast geographical distance that separates them, the two countries certainly share some commonalities. They're both democracies, diverse societies, and share similar development priorities. Now, it has been already said that the two countries have decided to develop a roadmap to upgrade the relationship to strategic partnership. Now I will basically focus on 4 areas of cooperation between our two countries. And the first is energy cooperation. Mexico is a key partner in India's energy security as crude oil is a major component of India's imports from the country. It is well known that it is one of the largest producer of crude oil in the world, 4th in Americas, and after the US, Canada, and Brazil. On the other hand, India is the 3rd largest importer and consumer of crude oil in the world. Energy security is an important driver of India's foreign policy. However, India's crude oil imports from Mexico will be reduced considerably in the next year as Mexico implements the policy to cut crude oil exports as it opens a new refinery. The move is driven by President Obrador's policy of energy independence and with a focus on expanding Mexico's domestic production of fuels instead of importing costly refined products. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to mention here that the Ukrainian crisis has underlined the importance of fossil fuels. Be that as it may be, this development presents the opportunity to enhance cooperation in the non-fossil fuel sector between our two countries. Mexico is also rich in fossil fuel energy sources, including solar, wind, and geothermal energy. Global commitments, as you are aware, towards climate change mitigation and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions are pushing countries across the world to move away from fossil fuel to cleaner fuels. A recent report, which I'd like to quote here from McKinsey, suggests that Mexico has the potential to become world leader in clean energy. So it'll be fruitful for India to expand cooperation with Mexico in the renewable sector, particularly in solar energy. But there has been a delay in this in the recent years because of the policies of the current administration. But I feel that there is a recent positive statement made by President AMLO regarding energy transition, where he talks of importance of energy resources and also the fact that it's not that we should not abandon the energy transition. And he also talks about the alternate energy sources. So this statement raises the hope of India-Mexico cooperation in this important sector. The second area of cooperation which I'd like to discuss here is that in agriculture and food security. India and Mexico share similar geoclimatic conditions. There's a huge scope for mutual cooperation in agriculture in areas like agro products, fisheries, food processing equipment, improved seed and farm equipment, and especially to enhance food security in the two countries. I would like to refer to the Indian scriptures here, where food is equated to God. Annan Brahma, So food is equated to God, and therefore within India, agriculture and food security have a very crucial and important place in our economic and larger domestic policy. So therefore, for India, cooperation with Mexico in this field is very important. And technical cooperation between India and Mexico in agro-food sector is not new. Mexican wheat varieties were used for producing the Indo-Mexican hybrids that were the backbone of India's green revolution in the 60s. And recently, as has been mentioned, India and Mexico have inked a new pact on cooperation in space technology. This agreement calls for greater cooperation between the two countries in the field of agriculture through the use of space inputs. It will help Mexico in crop monitoring, drought assessment, and capacity building. So there is ample scope for Indian and Mexican chambers of industry to promote cooperation in this crucial area of agro-food industry. Moving forward, the third area is of looking Mexico as gateway to Latin America. So I would like to mention here that for a very long time, Latin America and Caribbean region was neglected by successive Indian governments. But however, in the last 2 decades, there has been a steady growth in connections between India and the LAC countries, especially in the sectors of trade and economy. Despite serious challenges in past like political diversity, varying economic endowments, lack of adequate human resources, poor connectivity, and language issues, both sides are making strides in fructifying the relations. So Mexico is increasingly being recognized as a key actor for facilitating regional consensus and contributing to the region's development and prosperity. In 2021, it hosted the summit of Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. Latin America is a key region for countries' foreign and trade policy. And Latin America is also the top destination for Mexican investments abroad. And the fact that it has 14 trade agreements and membership of Pacific Alliance, a group that promotes regional integration, make it an important gateway for Indian economic connection with countries of the Latin American region, which is a region with whom India would like to enhance its relationship in future. Fourth area of cooperation I would like to share with you is the shared interest in Africa for both India and Mexico. In recent years, Mexico has shown interest in developing closer ties with African countries. Unlike India, which shares a historical and structured relationship with Africa, Mexican contact with the continent, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, has been limited. Mexico's commercial diplomatic footprint in the continent is also small. However, looking at the economic progress in Africa in the recent decades, Mexico has shown interest in expanding diplomatic presence over there. On its part, India has initiated triangular development cooperation with like-minded countries such as Japan, US, and the United Arab Emirates. Moreover, as the East African Indian Ocean littoral countries are part of the Indo-Pacific construct, and knowing Mexico's deep interest in this area, India may consider sharing experiences with Mexico and also in future consider collaboration with select African countries. So in the end, I hope that the increased contact between India and Mexico and the growing convergence on bilateral issues at the government-to-government level also leads to greater dialogue between industry, think tanks, academia, civil society that will help in developing a broader roadmap for sustained partnership between the two countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ruchita Berry, for excellent classification of 4 areas which are of great potential interest for this relationship. You have completely avoided repeating the points which had been made earlier, and it is very clear that you see a great deal of potential in areas such as energy and agriculture. And the last 2 points you made, that is for India to look at Mexico as the gateway to that region, and for India and Mexico to look at possibilities of collaboration in Africa, which I think were pointed out by DG Sujan Chinoy as well, make a lot of sense, particularly to those of us who have actually served in Africa over a long period of time. Thank you very much. Dear friends, now we have the last panelist for this session, and this is Ambassador Nathan Wolf, who is former ambassador of Mexico to Singapore, and he's also a member of COMEXI. He's going to address us on India-Mexico bilateral relations perspective from Mexico. Over to you, Ambassador Wolf.
Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia. Good morning, Mexico. Good evening, India. I want to recognize and congratulate Manohar Parrikar Institute and COMEXI for putting together this virtual bilateral dialogue. I am very happy to share this webinar with great and admired colleagues and friends, Ambassador Sharma, Ambassador Salas, Irma Gomez, Sergio Alcocer, and all of you. Mexico and India have striking similarities in geoclimatic conditions, biodiversity, culture, family values, and if you ask me, the best 2 cuisines, I love naan bread, curry chicken masala, the same way I like tacos, enchiladas, or mole. Mexico and India have a warm and cordial bilateral relation. We both are regional powers, and we need to think strategically. During the visit of former President Felipe Calderón to India in 2007, the bilateral relations were upgraded to a privileged partnership. Now, we should focus on a strategic partnership as stated in 2016 during the visit to Mexico of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In order to achieve this strategic partnership, the roadmap necessarily passes through facilitate the trade and investment on both ways, a deeper cooperation in science and technology in fields like space cooperation, IT, medicine, vaccines, education. No doubt, the cultural relation and similarities together with people-to-people contacts are crucial to the success of the strategic partnership. Despite being the antipodes, we face similar challenges that will plot the path in the coming years. Social trends in the world have been affected countless times by factors that are not alien to citizens and they are part of the daily life of the world population. The COVID-19 pandemic, the economic crisis and recession, in addition to various regularity actions, permanently change the political, social, and economic course of regions such as South Asia or Latin America, drawing a new panorama that must be taken into account by its inhabitants to strengthen the search of their well-being and that of their families. Increase in poverty is something that we have to take a very deep look. Transition to a green economy. This trend is and will be one of the main protagonists in the coming years, aligned with the United Nations Global Compact and with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. I want to take, actually, in this regard, I want to take the opportunity to express my condolences for human losses due to the recent floods in India. Transformation of geopolitical interests, global events such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and in general changes in environmental conditions, technological developments, and economic, social, cultural, and political globalization have transformed the environment, propitiating the emergence of new strategic assets for nations like Mexico and India, consequently modifying the system of international alliances. Dilution of borders in the digital age, the fourth industrial revolution, the speed of change, and the new expectations lead companies to permanently transform and risk entering fields that transcend their traditional performance, crossing the barriers of their economic sector through the development of new models of business. Globalization and its associated risk. Bearing in mind that the effects of the economic behavior of a country or multinational company, cyber attacks, the effects of climate change, social inequality, and protest movements cross borders, it becomes increasingly important international cooperation among countries like ours. The supply chain crisis caused mainly by the asymmetric recovery at the global level had already been causing deviations in the expected economic performance in different regions of the world. Additionally, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine brings economic and financial consequences that could begin to be reflected in the deterioration in their perception of risk and greater inflationary pressure that leads to a possible economic slowdown due to the measures that must be taken to mitigate it. Another trend to highlight is the increasingly migratory flows. Last but not least, in my current position at the Tecnológico of Monterrey University, we have been working with Ambassador Sharma on educational cooperation, and last June, we were honored to welcome at one of our campus to the Indian Vice Minister of Foreign Relations, Ambassador Saurav Kumar. No doubt, Mexico and India, as regional powers, share common challenges, but together we can have the ways to mean to success. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Wolf, for being very concise and highlighting a number of key points from the perspective of Mexico. We are very appreciative of the key points you have made, and you have ended up referring to the Foreign Office consultations and the educational cooperation initiative that is now underway. Dear friends, we have really overshot this session by about 25 minutes. There is a provision for question and answer session. I do not know whether we have questions from the audience, but I think with DG's indulgence, I would like to put as share of this only one question, and that would go to Ambassador Wolf. And this is about essentially a major aspect which can bring our two countries closer together without making too much of an effort outwardly. Given Mexico's and India's global approach to issues. And given our shared membership of G20, there's a lot of rising excitement in India that India would be chairing G20 for the next 1 year. And India really wants all its friends to be present when it hosts the summit. Now, we know that President of Mexico has certain approach on foreign visits and so on. But my question is there something we from the academic circles and friends of the government do to persuade that President Obrador comes and attends the G20 summit meeting in India?
Wow, tough question. From my perspective and outside already from the government, what I can see is that President Obrador is not very kind and willing to travel abroad. So he hasn't attended any recent international summits. He just made few short travels to the region, to Central America and to the US. So in my personal opinion, I don't see he will be traveling to the summit.
Thank you very much. I asked this specifically because the two ambassadors are part of this audience and they would draw their own conclusions. Sujan, may I go with some more questions, or you rather ask me to close this now because time is running out?
I mean, perhaps one more question and then move on.
Okay. Can someone help me with a question which is there from audience, or should I ask a question? Is there a question? I can't see it on
There's a question in the chat box, sir. Can you see that?
Could you just read it for me, please?
Yeah. Despite the fact that Mexico has long participated in APEC, ASEAN, it is only in 2013 that the government strategic plan, Plan Nacional or PND 2013 and 2018 presented goals and objectives for interactions with Asia. However, there's not a single direct mention of India in the PND. What is your comment on the recent PND plan and hopes for India? This is for the participant from Mexico.
Perhaps Ambassador Wolf would like to attempt this as well.
Well, I think it's right, and we should. There is this bias when we talk about Asia. We tend to talk just about China, unfortunately. So it's this kind of events, this kind of dialogues, by working together, country hand by hand, countries like Mexico and India, that we have changed that, and we have to put more in the map, more in the discussion, to show the possibilities and the opportunities that the bilateral relation between Mexico and India can provide to all the sectors. As I mentioned, in different fields, there is a lot of potential that we should look at and continue working regardless of any kind of document that comes up.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I simply want to make my final observation, which is to say that this is the week when India's foreign minister is visiting Latin America, and therefore the awareness about developments in Latin America, including in Mexico, is very high. I think it would be prudent to convey a tip to our Mexican friends that probably time has come for Mexico to spell out its Asia policy and particularly its Indo-Pacific policy, and to convey to its Indian friends whether it only has an economic and trade component or also security and a strategic dimension as well, because things are changing in this region in a big way. But I'm sure that the academics, the officials, the diplomats would work to exploit the opportunities which are going to present themselves during this year and the next year, which can bring our two countries together I think this dialogue with IDSA and COMEXI is a wonderful step. And I think if we can spread our footprint of this kind of work, both in India and in Mexico, which are both large countries and which simply cannot be driven by capital-based institutions, it would be a wonderful way to support this collectively. I thank my panelists who have done a great job, and I invite the audience to convey their appreciation by waving their hands, and I now hand it over back to the DG. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bhatia, for chairing the first session in such an exemplary fashion. We now move on to session 2, which is to focus on emerging areas of cooperation. And the chair for this is Mr. Vladimir Vazquez Hernandez, Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of Mexico in Honduras. So may I turn over to you and request you to kindly chair this session. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mexico City. Good evening, Delhi. It is my deepest honor to being invited to chair this session number 2, Emerging Areas of Cooperation. Thank you for COMEXI and thank you for Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. Indeed, I am currently the DCM in Honduras, but 10 years ago, I was posted from 2009-2013 as a DCM in New Delhi. Then I was appointed an advisor and Deputy Director General for Asia Pacific. Back at my time, India was slowing its rate of growth, and I would like to stress enough about slowing, because you were growing at a rate of 7.5%, if I remember correctly, from a tendency of 9%, which was huge. And as expected, in the decade following my departure, India went from the top 8 to the top 3 in military spending back at the time. And when it comes to analyzing the history of the bilateral relations, we emphasize that Mexico was the first Latin American country to recognize India after independence and to establishing diplomatic relations in 1950. And we have all quoted Octavio Paz saying that we understand India better because we are Mexicans, and the opposite might be true as well. In the multilateral level, coincidence vote in the United Nations is about 70%, last time I checked. Despite the fact we have differences when it comes to reform the United Security Councils and nuclear energy. Back in my days, 8 out of 10 visa interviews for Indian applicants were for young software engineers coming to Mexico for a contract for developing a base for industrialization, or for simply tackling the task of programming something to make things work better in the Mexican industry. And I cannot forget those, because maybe those were the roots for new avenues of cooperation. And at the time, India was forging a name between the nation with the capabilities to explore space, not to mention pharmaceutical capabilities. And since my tenure in India, the world has changed dramatically. We have now the war in Europe, and we have tackled and still going on epidemic, where pharmaceutical capabilities show how important it is to have a decentralized ecosystem for producing vaccines. And for properly discuss these issues, we have now 4 panelists. I would like to first introduce Colonel Vivek Chanda, who is a retired colonel of the Indian Army after 22 years of service. And he is a research fellow at the MP-IDSA. He also belongs to the Institute for Defense Studies, Analyses, and become a research fellow. at the Military Air Force Center, and his areas of research cover a wide variety of issues covering counterterrorism, low-intensity conflicts, effectiveness through military change, integration of the Indian Armed Force, and military doctrine. Colonel Chanda, you have the floor. I think time is limited to 8 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for this opportunity. I'll quickly get onto the subject. Indian Mexico, as it has been spelled today often, that we've had a long-standing opportunity and a standing relationship, which had been elevated to the level of a strategic partnership in 2016. However, if we have a brief look at the contours of this relationship, and I think that's come out in the dialogue quite clearly today, it suggests that even as trade has been on the upswing, there has not been enough in terms of cooperation in the sphere of security. So at the outset, let me welcome this as an initiative to bring representatives from different fields onto a single platform and include what I feel is a very important area of security cooperation within the ambit of the dialogue today. So my brief presentation today is going to focus more on the potential of India-Mexico security partnership. I will not go back into what all has happened in the past. And I feel that the security partnership hinges upon the security scenarios, which is evolving, and the realities which are true for both the countries. Now, some security concerns are common for both the countries, which includes things like terrorism, which has been discussed today, issues of radicalization, and the need for a rule-based international order. Others may be, of course, local to both the countries. However, under both conditions, the possibility to create consensus, create a common approach to security issues, and where possible, seek areas of cooperation is what can guide this relationship forward. So I think this is the basis of how we need to possibly look at this relationship. Now, there are certain drivers, and I would like to highlight probably one, which has become a key to how things are evolving in the field of security. The last couple of decades have transformed the scope and scale of security challenges. This has been spearheaded by an information age, which has bridged gaps as much for the common citizens as it did for those indulging in crime and threatening the security of countries. So it's affected both. This implies that security concerns have outgrown the traditional domains represented by the armed forces, and today it's all the more demands that we have all of government approach and in fact all of society approach to security, and we'll see why as we go through this presentation. Between an age-old practice of hawala or hundi as it is called in certain areas of the world to the new age cryptocurrency, the compartmentalization of security challenges has merged to challenge governments at a very broad-based level. Similarly, just as the ability of the government has been facilitated by an ever-enlarging digital connect with the population of respective countries, simultaneously a global reach has been created by those who wish to spread the message of hate and intolerance. And since the footprint of threats is increasingly global, the response must therefore also be based on a common understanding of the challenges and their impact. Let me specifically look at a few areas where I feel there is potential for growing partnership between our two countries in the area of security. The first relates to terrorism and radicalization. Unlike the past, terrorism is no longer limited by geography or national boundaries. Just as our people have become increasingly mobile around an interconnected world, so have terrorist networks and those who are willing to take forth their destructive ideology, even as lone wolves. Today, it is no longer adequate to protect citizens of our country within the national boundaries. It is equally relevant to contribute towards a common fight against the contagion of terrorism globally. To my mind, this can be facilitated by reiteration and agreement on some basic and broad principles. Firstly, there can be no justification for terrorism, irrespective of the purported cause that might be propagated. Second, there should be no support for terrorist recruitment, funding, or presence in any country. Third, there cannot be any justification for employing terrorism as a state tool in the garb of moral and diplomatic support for the so-called freedom fighters. And fourth, there is a need for strong and united and concerted support for action against countries and non-state actors which are involved in terrorism. The second area that I'd like to highlight is a linkage between crime, money laundering, and terrorist financing. There has been a lot of work done in recent years to highlight and reinforce the common challenge posed as a result of close linkages between crime, money laundering, and terrorist financing. It is well acknowledged that channels of moving funds that are used by criminal networks also tend to get exploited by terrorist networks. Similarly, proceeds of crime that are laundered through layering can involve players who can also facilitate funding of terrorist groups, and we have seen this in India as has been seen elsewhere in the world. This reinforces the need to look beyond traditional areas of security while planning security cooperation between governments to simultaneously include sectors which are involved in the management, say, of, let's say, finances and even the private sector broadly. Third area that I want to talk about is border management. Border management is a key area of concern for both India and Mexico. Even though the kind of challenges that are faced by the two countries are different, there is scope for enhancing expertise on the basis of experiences that have been gained on both the sides. Successful border management includes optimal utilization of technological innovations, a seamless grid for receiving information, collation, deriving intelligence, and thereafter facilitating an effective response by an appropriate force to neutralize it. Over the years, adaptations have characterized the kind of challenges that have posed special issues for border management. This provides an opportunity to share case studies, best practices, and solutions applied to effectively deal with challenges faced by both countries in their respective domains. The next area is of coastal security. Both India and Mexico face a wide variety of challenges along the vast coastal areas. This yet again emerges as an area with scope for building cooperation. On India's part, the Coast Guard has faced diverse threats ranging from terrorist movement, trafficking, smuggling, and criminal activities. The capacity of the Coast Guard has enhanced appreciably over the years. This includes an improved surveillance grid which assists in better transparency of the areas of responsibility. The Coast Guard also operates varied platforms which provides experience with handling a very vast area of operations. This gives the force a unique experience that can be shared. Similarly, Mexico would also have the unique challenges that can provide useful inputs for the Indian side. Next area is defense manufacturing, which again had been spoken about in the introductory part. India has undertaken a very concerted and deliberate effort aimed at enhancing domestic defense manufacturing capacity. This is a part of the ongoing Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. As part of this initiative, one of the success story involves the indigenous designing and manufacturing of vessels for the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard. This is an area that can be explored by Mexico to assist in filling up any gaps in capacity that may exist. In addition to naval vessels, a number of initiatives are underway to manufacture drones, surveillance equipment that may yet again be of interest for Mexico. On the other hand, India provides an opportunity for collaboration and investment, as has been pointed out earlier again today. The specific area of defense cooperation, India and Mexico have had limited defense cooperation in the past. In addition to cooperating on common interests like maintaining a free and open ocean space as also a rule-based order, it would be useful to explore areas of cooperation to facilitate humanitarian assistance and disaster relief initiatives. India has also been amongst the first responders in a number of instances to assist and evacuate people affected by natural disasters and zones of conflict. This includes evacuation of citizens of multiple nationalities. Given the wide spread of citizens in a globalized world, it would be useful to maintain close liaison for facilitating such actions in times of need. The security forces of India and Mexico also have vast experience which can be shared on a reciprocal basis through presence in courses of instruction and in training academies. The last area, of course, is space cooperation, which has been spoken about today. So I will only highlight that this could potentially include areas linked to security as well, which, as an example, could be the areas of communications, for which India has launched a number of satellites for its own security forces. I will end my presentation here and look forward to any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel, very much for sharing your thoughts about new ways for security cooperation. regarding terrorism, radicalization. My understanding is that both position in this regard has been very closed, and Mexico has always supported India in this regard because we understand terrorism and we share your views in this regard. And water management is key for the coming decades, and both countries faces the challenges of the climate change. So this issue will become even more important. And the Coast Guard cooperation and defensive manufacturing must be definitely taken into account for a common understanding in the years to come. Thank you for sharing your views in this regard. Now, allow me to introduce the perspective from Mexico with Mr. Fausto Carvajal Glass, who is holding a master's degree in war studies at King College London. He has a bachelor degree in international relations from Universidad Iberoamericana. He graduated from Strategic and Defense Policy course in the National Defense University in Washington. And he is a lecturer in strategic intelligence at Universidad Anáhuac. He analyzes national security, geopolitics, conflicts, security, and development. Mr. Carvajal, the floor is yours. We have 8 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador Vladimir. Do you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you to the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations, COMEXI, and of course, the Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. Thank you very much indeed to both institutions for your kind invitation. Allow me to start by quickly celebrating India's Independence Day last week. I think it's worth mentioning that since gaining independence in 1947, India has become the largest democracy worldwide, and certainly a model of national progress that is possible when freedom, nationalism, and of course, international engagement are intertwined. So congratulations to the country of the Bhagavad Gita, country, of course, of Mahatma Gandhi, the country of the future. Now, the title of this session is Emerging Areas of Cooperation between Mexico and India, and in particular, security cooperation between our two nations. So, in order to address this subject, I would like to start by regarding security as a multidimensional concept. So, in a very comprehensive fashion, something that is indeed reflected on the program of this bilateral dialogue. So, in this sense, Mexico and India have very deep convergence of long-term political and strategic goals associated to security. And by mentioning them, I would also like to highlight emerging areas of security cooperation. Firstly, and this is, of course, in light of the geopolitical transition we're going through, well, we both share the promotion of a rules-based international order, as my fellow colleague has already said. And, well, indeed, it's a shared political and strategic goal. I won't elaborate much on that because it is something the next session will probably expand on. So, in addition, we share the idea of universal access to vaccines. And I would like to note that I'm saying this not as a health issue, but as a security imperative. So medicines, medical equipment to tackle COVID-19 became essential to both countries, and we share the idea of universal access to them. And by the way, I should make a parenthesis here. My colleague Guadalupe has already said this, but it's said that we know who our friends really are in times of hardship and adversity. And India certainly took a step forward when we, as a country, and also them, is even more important, we were struggling the most during the pandemic. So, well, India made a generous donation in terms of vaccines. So from a multidimensional approach to security cooperations, one of the lessons during the pandemic was that Mexico should expand the bilateral relationship with India in the field of pharma, particularly bilateral cooperation on scientific matters and, well, in scientific research. I mean, unfortunately, this last pandemic won't be the last. So we better be prepared to face similar security challenges in the near future. We also share the political and strategic objective of the promotion of democracy, political pluralism, and the defense of fundamental rights in our own societies. And well, in the security field, this objective is translated into the shared concern over non-traditional security challenges, perhaps chief among them, as it has been already said, global terrorism. Of course, due to our respective geostrategic position and geopolitical imperatives, global terrorism is a challenge to both our countries. And I would like to put an example. For instance, on the Mexican side, there would have been serious implications for Mexico should the terrorists that committed the heinous attacks of 9/11 had crossed through the Mexican border. So, well, it's unnecessary to say that it would have been problematic, to say the least. So that is why global terrorism is an essential part of Mexico's national security agenda. Having said this, and trying to make some policy recommendations, well, it is relevant to increase high-level engagement in these issues, the exchange of good practices, certainly intelligence sharing, and other forms of security cooperation on this subject. And something very important, finally, and this is the third element I would like to build on. I think another emerging area of security cooperation should be the space sector, particularly covering the areas of remote sensing, satellite communications, and peaceful use of outer space. It is worth mentioning that India, well, is a country that develops its own satellites and rockets. And actually, it is a country that has reached Mars with low-cost spacecraft. So it's something very commendable and particularly remarkable. So in particular, cooperation between our two space agencies should improve Mexico's satellite capacity to deal with natural disasters such as hurricanes or earthquakes or massive fires, just to name a few. So bottom line with these, when it comes to space cooperation, it would be important to upgrade bilateral cooperation and include joint research and innovation on this sector. So to wrap up, because I know it's we have time is limited. Well, there are many areas for security cooperation between our two countries. I wanted to focus on three, namely pharma, non-traditional security challenges, and outer space. Of course, pharma and outer space will considering these sectors in a more multidimensional way in order to address well, myriad problems that Mexico and India has and need to share. So I would like to stop here, but I would like to say that well, it's been a pleasure to be part of this panel, and thank you again for the kind invitation to both institutions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carvajal, for sharing your views and these three issues about universal access of vaccines, cooperation in pharma, which is indeed the most immediate analysis about non-traditional security challenges. We have increasingly seen that those non-traditional security challenges are moving people from one country to another country. So Mexico is deeply interested in that. So if we have a better vaccine system all over the world, if we have a better water management system, if we share technology and knowledge about space sharing and sense how climate change is affecting our countries, we benefit from the ongoing analysis on how to tackle those issues from the Mexican perspective, at least. So we have those new avenues of cooperations. And then we shift to the second part of the session, which is multilateral cooperation. Let me first introduce to Dr. Rajesh Kumar, who is an associate fellow at MP-IDSA. He is a professor at Jamia Millia Islamiyya at New Delhi. and a professor at the University of Calicut in Kerala. Dr. Kumar is the author of several books and co-author of articles and journals regarding multilateral peace and security, the Red Cross, the Eurozone crisis, and the future of Europe. And his articles and opinion pieces appear in such an influential newspapers such as The Hindu, which I miss reading quite daily, The Diplomat, the Japan Times, and the Tehran Times. Dr. Kumar, the floor is yours. We have 8 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great privilege to be on this panel today. In the next 8 minutes, I would like to share with you the Indian perspective on multilateralism with a special reference to India-Mexico multilateral cooperation. Since the very first step for the multilateral cooperation, in my understanding, is understanding each other's priorities and interests. So I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss India's priorities and interests in various global multilateral platforms. Then I'll list out the possible areas of multilateral cooperation between the two. As you know, multilateral engagement has always been one of the core tenets of Indian foreign policy. India was one of the most ambitious players when the edifice of the multilateral institutions was built in the post-Second World War period. For instance, India became a member of the United Nations even before its independence. India was co-founder of NAM, as well as advocate of peaceful settlement of conflicts. India's commitments to UN peacekeeping operation is another example, and also India today is a member of more than 2,000 international organizations. From India's point of view, each multilateral platforms of which is a part has different benefits. For instance, in the UN, India's priorities are promoting a responsible and inclusive solution to international peace and security, and to ensure a fair and equitable international system. On international peace and security issues, the guiding principles of India's approach are sovereignty, UN centrality, and non-intervention. This is why, while proactively supporting the United Nations peacekeeping operations, India is somewhat reluctant to support the ideas such as R2P and humanitarian intervention. On trade and development issues, India's utmost priority is its domestic development. In these forums, India argues for mainly fairness and justice. The developing country coalitions are the means to achieve these priorities in these forums related to trade and development. Similarly, on the issue of climate change, India's interest is to find a balance between domestic development and its international commitments. The guiding principles are common but differentiated responsibilities and per capita emissions, etc. So the centrality of UNFCCC is also important in the context of climate change negotiation for India. For instance, recently India voted down a recent UNSC resolution on climate change and security, citing these particular facts. So when we take the multilateral approach, India's multilateral approach as a whole, reforming the current multilateral order is an important priority for India. India has been constantly voices for a democratic, liberal, and rule-based global order. So India's efforts to reform the UN Security Council, its growing interest in regional multilateralism, and plurilateral groupings are examples of these priority and interest. One more thing we should keep in mind while talking about India's multilateral approach is it's an evolving one. It's dynamic. It's not static. From 1947 to 2022, it has evolved a lot. Similarly, the priorities are overlapping in these different multilateral institutions. India also believes that there is an institutionalized discrimination in the post-World War multilateral order. For example, this is clearer in India's approach to nuclear non-proliferation related issues. In short, when we take India's multilateral approach as a whole, India's approach is principled, it's pragmatic, and it's also evolving. And India is not an naysayer. That means saying no means expressing its reservation. So it means that on that specific issue, India couldn't find a balance between domestic preferences and global commitments. And India's multilateral diplomacy only complements and supplements its bilateral relations. Coming to the India-Mexico cooperation, the most significant question is in an era where great power rivalries dominate in the global politics and the relevance of multilateralism is being questioned. Can India and Mexico cooperation reinvigorate multilateral organizations? To get the answer, one should know the possible issue areas where India and Mexico can cooperate and also where the possibilities of cooperation is limited. Take the case of the United Nations. India and Mexico are currently elected non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Both seek UNSC reforms, however, part of different coalitions and support different reform proposals. This means the possibilities of cooperation in this area in the United Nations Security Council or in the United Nations in general is limited. However, there are issue areas within the United Nations itself where India and Mexico can cooperate and work together. For example, as Colonel Chadha already discussed, the global terrorism. Global terrorism is a priority for both India and Mexico. The recent UNSC debates on international cooperation in combating terrorism shows that India and Mexico are somewhat on the same page. For instance, in January 2021, when India proposed the 8 points to address the threat of global terrorism and ensure some effective action, Mexico also highlighted areas of opportunity to strengthen the counterterrorism committee, which India is heading now. Similarly, on the issue of peacekeeping, there are possibilities of strengthening multilateral cooperation between the two. For instance, in 2020, Mexico has opened a joint training center for peacekeeping operations, and India has vast experience in this field, and it can be shared. And a collaboration between India's Center for United Nations Peacekeeping in New Delhi and the Mexican counterpart will also be considered. And the second multilateral platform, the issues related to trade, the WTO. India, it's a fact that WTO is an impasse at present, but India and Mexico share the belief that the cornerstone of the current negotiations is in the WTO is the agriculture sector, and which is at most relevance for the well-being of the most vulnerable population in both countries. So both countries are demanding for the suppression of export subsidies and the reduction of domestic support within the developed agricultural market or trade distorting subsidies. Similar to India, Mexico's position within the WTO has maintained an equilibrium between domestic constraints and international imperatives. The G20 is another area which India will be the next president and is likely to remain at the leading edge of international cooperation, especially in post-pandemic era, on important issues including reforms of multilateral order, economic, trade, health, and livelihoods. So cooperation at G20 would be a good testing ground for both Mexico and India, how their proposal for reforms in multilateral organization can be achieved. And one of the panelists already discussed the climate change cooperation, both in terms of renewable and non-renewable, and the cooperation between India and Mexico with International Solar Alliance, and maybe cooperating in coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure. Both are Indian initiatives. And so in my view, there are lots of issue areas, even if it is in short term, it is symbolic, and long term, the material substantive party can be achieved through multilateral cooperation, and both countries' bilateral relations and national interest can be achieved or supplemented through this multilateral cooperation as well. So to conclude, India and Mexico need to better understand each other's political reality, capabilities, and priorities. So both sides needs to define the priorities after realistically assessing the capabilities and the prospects for the engagement in multilateral platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for sharing your views in this regard. And thank you for reminding us that despite differences in views of how to reform the United Nations Security Council, we have great other opportunities, particularly in peacekeeping operations. The Mexican forces has a lot to learn from the experience, from the deployment, from the missions taken by the Indian Army and the Indian Armed Forces when it comes to peacekeeping operations. And just because of the experience, it could be quite a challenge to learn from you, just from how troops you deployed on grounds, how differences, and particularly for a country like a global vision like Mexico, your experience and expertise in this regard is quite, we shouldn't miss a lot. And yes, the G20 is all a pending issue for coordination between two countries. And now I will give the floor to Dr. Irma Gomez Cavazos, who is, he has a PhD in economics and a master in economics. She is a specialist in environmental economics and quantitative methods at Texas University. He has also a degree in economy in Tecnológico de Monterrey. And she is the editor of the book Globalization and International Justice. He has a chapter on the governments and water sector in Mexico, published by the Inter-America Development Bank. And she is an expert in sustainability, climate change, education, finance, digitalization, and organizational restructuring. And she is an independent director of the board of the Mexican Army and Navy Bank. Dr. Gomez, the floor is yours. We have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I know I'm the last one, and I'm going to try to be very short. Thank you, COMEXI and the Manohar Parrikar Institute for this invitation to participate in this panel. I am very happy to share the floor with all of you. And I would like, after the first panelist on Kumar on multilateral cooperation, I'm not going to repeat that, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more pragmatic. So we have been discussing in all morning or afternoon in India, how can we cooperate better? In the multilateral arena, I think another area that was touched earlier in this event was money laundering, and I think we can easily cooperate that. But one area that I would like to stress is education. After the pandemic in both countries accelerate the use of technology to addressing the challenge to equity and access. And I think we can share bilaterally what we have learned, because this is very challenging in India and also in Mexico. We have areas in which we cannot reach the schools with very, very easily. And I think that's an area that we can share and deep our cooperation bilaterally and also in the multilateral areas. And I'm going to give a little bit more on this area. The technology now is playing and driving the system and process of education, and we need to focus on the process of the curriculum development. How we can introduce coding and data sciences in the school curricula. And India has a lot of experience in these areas of technology. And I think we can, and Mexico also has expertise in this area. And when we talk about education, I'm talking about the whole area of education, in education for elementary school, but also education as the universities. And several of the ambassadors point out that we already are collaborating in the bilateral level at the university level. That's a very good starting point for bilateral cooperation because allows people to learn from the other country, learn about the culture of the other one, and the ties get closer. So here, thinking about the Institute and COMEXI, I think we have members that can be very easily work with the embassies in both countries to reach more university cooperation between the countries. And this will give us a platform to find ways in which we can collaborate together a lot better. The other thing that was touched was how Mexico can be like the door to Latin America, and triangular cooperation. It's a very good way to go. Mexico and India, both countries already have doing that. And I think if we find ways in the means on education, on health, as I was mentioned, on water management system, we can find ways in collaborate India and Mexico in Latin America together, or India and Mexico in some countries in Africa. And I think the need to find, as it was mentioned before, how we define the priorities, and the priorities are already on the table. We talk about climate change, health, about education, about security, and then how the capabilities of each country can be put together on the table and find ways to have a common agenda at the multilateral cooperation organizations, as United Nations, UNESCO is one of the areas in which we can collaborate on education. On WTO, it's another forum with the area of international trade, in which, as it was mentioned, agricultural sector is very important for both countries. So I think with all that has been said this morning, we need to start finding teams and working together on these different areas of expertise that both institutions have, and finding ways to do triangular cooperation with Latin America and Africa, and also multilateral cooperation in the international in the international arena. And I think for India, G20 is going to be a very good opportunity to push all of these topics further. Thank you very much. My time is, I think, my 8 minutes have passed. I I really thank you for listening to my ideas. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez, for sharing your view from the perspective of the economic. And I deeply have a coincidence with you in the centrality of education for the future, for the multilateral cooperation. While opening this session, I mentioned that 8 out of 10 visa interviews we made in the Mexican embassy back at my time were for young engineers, but at least one out of those 10 were for young PhD candidates, Indian candidates, willing to join Mexican institutions like UNAM, like Sinvestav, and that is the future. I think the Mexican youth has not realized yet how difficult it is to get accepted into an Indian university. To my understanding, it is even more difficult to reach in an Indian university, top level, than Chicago or Harvard. So if we have an understanding of how multilateral education system has gone all over the world, and we take India as an example of growing in education, will be in the right directions. On the other hand, you stress also the importance of triangular cooperation. I remember before being deployed to New Delhi 1 decade ago, I was posted in El Salvador, and then I'm posted in Honduras, and I receive a lot of people, companies and government officials asking questions, Mexico, on how to tackle solar energy, particularly solar energy. And it comes to mind, well, India has always offered solar energy technology for tackling climate change. Why don't we focus on triangular cooperation to tackle those issues in this region? Because challenges are similar. So we have a great opportunity in dealing with this. And thank you for sharing your views. And I think we conclude in this way the second session on security and multilateral cooperation. I return the floor to the coordinator.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vladimir Vasquez Hernandez, for so very ably chairing this second session. From my side, I just want to assure everyone, before I hand over to my colleague, Major General Bakshi, to deliver the concluding remarks on our behalf, that we will follow up on all the points that have been made by both sides. We are not going to leave this as a one-off event to be heard from one ear and to be, thrown out of the other. We actually want to log on to some of these issues, and then both at our end as well as I'm sure at Ambassador Pankaj Sharma's end, we will together follow up with the government. Likewise, I hope it'll be the same on the Mexican side. So thank you from my side. I now invite Major General Dr. Vipin Bakshi, the Deputy Director General, and my able colleague here to deliver the concluding remarks on behalf of our institute. Floor is yours.
Thank you, sir.
I can, just a minute, please. I see Ambassador Pankaj Sharma asking for the floor. Go ahead, please.
Sir, thank you very much. And I wanted to thank all the panelists, but I just wanted to make a brief remark here that something very exciting is going to take place in 3 weeks from now. We will have 30 Mexican diplomats, young diplomats from all over the world coming to India for a 2-week training at the Institute of Foreign Service Institute in New Delhi, followed by a 2-day or 3-day module at the Rashtriya Raksha University. And I've taken the liberty of offering them a lunch on your behalf. Ambassador Chinoy has always been very kind and generous. So
Sure.
a half-day session with you, sir, followed by a lunch or a dinner, as you might want to host.
Yes, I can tell you from my time there that the Mexicans are enormously generous people, and we will, seek to reciprocate their generosity that we have experienced in Mexico. So yes, please do send them to us. Over to you, General Bakshi.
Thank you, sir. Buenos dias and good evening to all. Well, we have seen so many of our speakers recounting that India and Mexico share very friendly, warm and cordial ties, characterized by increasing mutual understanding and growing bilateral trade. And as was mentioned by Ambassador Salas, the trade has gone up. We have crossed 10 billion, and we are the 9th largest trading partner of Mexico, while our topmost trade partner in Latin America is Mexico. And since Mexico is part of the USMCA and also has multiple free trade agreements encompassing 46 countries, it is perceived as an investment hub for the entire Latin American and North American regions. As mentioned today by Ms. Ruchita, Mexico is indeed our gateway to the region. Well, impelled by our commonalities and the convergence of worldviews, we have been collaborating closely on many global issues: nuclear disarmament, climate change, trade, global architecture, and as was discussed by the last two speakers, more themes could be explored where we could collaborate in the multilateral arena. Well, in our recent Foreign Office consultations, June 22, the agreement on cooperation in outer space was signed, which is focusing on crop monitoring and drought assessment between ISRO and the Mexican Space Agency, AEM. This could possibly be extended into the security domain too, as mentioned by both sides, Colonel Chadda on our side and Mr. Fausto on their side. The ITEC program has been extended to Mexico since 91. We already have about 35 training slots available to Mexican participants annually. We could see more training cooperation. And in fact, very recently, I saw some flight cadets from Mexico doing flying training in India too. Well, there is tremendous scope to enhance our defense cooperation and collaborate in areas like combating transnational terrorism, which was mentioned by Mr. Fausto, Dr. Ashok Bhauria, and also Colonel Chadda, which I'm sure we will see in the day to come. I'm happy to note, sir, that very recently last year, our NDC delegation visited Mexico from 11th to 16th October and held interaction with your ministries and your academic institutions. In fact, Ambassador Federico Salas had visited our NDC to brief the delegation on the 6th of October last year for that trip. We look forward to a reciprocal visit from your NDC also to us, and we do hope that our institute will again figure on their itinerary, just as you mentioned your diplomats' itinerary will include us. Well, events like this bilateral dialogue will help us to propel our strategic partnership, which was announced in 2016, further, and we look forward to more such interactions in the future. I must take this opportunity to thank our organizers, our DG, the President COMEXI, both the ambassadors who gave their special remarks, the chairpersons, the speakers, our participants, and the technical team who has set up this very first bilateral exchange between our institute and COMEXI. Have a good day. Adios. Gracias.
Thank you, General Bakshi. You can have the last word, Mr. Vladimir Vasquez Hernandez, not just because you know a lot about India, but also because I know you personally. And when I was appointed the ambassador of India to Mexico in 2012, I had the pleasure of interacting with you and your ambassador here before I left for Mexico, and subsequently in Mexico as well. So it would not be out of place if you were to have the last word.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words. I miss a lot Ananiketan, a lot. Far beyond, I would like to point out that hegemony is currently under reconsideration and reconfiguration. We have Europe, we have the US, we have China emerging. New global actors have now a bigger size in the pie. And I think Mexico and India are particularly well suited for tackling those challenges together in the reconfiguration of the world order. I cannot forget that the top Indian leadership is always schooled and trained in understanding Chinese leadership, for example. Just by sharing your views and your thoughts about how the new world is emerging will be of great help for Mexicans to understand the world ahead. And the other side is true. We have also a lot to say about Latin American configurations, just to balance a little bit relation between your country and my region as a Latin Americanist. And that would be my concluding remark.
Well, time has passed by very quickly, and we hope to see you again, hopefully in person. But in any case, we hope to repeat this performance in the not too distant future. So from all of us here in New Delhi, hasta la vista, hasta luego. Gracias a todos.
Hasta
Buenos
la
días.
vista. Buenos días.
Luego, buenos días, buenas tardes. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Buenos días. Good day.
Bye-bye. Good day.
Namaste. Bye-bye.
Thank you.